This podcast is proudly sponsored by Gyro Drilling. They provide world-class drilling solutions for all types of projects. They specialise in auger, aircore and RC drilling. Head to the team at Gyro Drilling for all your mining needs and see how they can help you with your upcoming project. Hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. As this podcast grows, every subscriber helps. From those of you who watch this on YouTube or to those that listen on Spotify and Apple, every follower helps. If you do this one favour and hit follow on whatever platform you find us on, I promise I will continue to look and find fascinating people across the world and bring their perspectives to you. Thank you and enjoy this episode.
So hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. Joining me today on the show, he joined me early last year. It's almost been 12 months since we spoke, but is Ben Turney, the CEO of Kavango Resources, which is listed on the London Stock Exchange under code KAV. There's been a lot of unfolding since I last spoke with him, and that's the purpose of this conversation, is to unpack all the new news and activity. So welcome back, Ben.
Thanks very much for having me, Ben. And as you say, a lot's happened since we last spoke a year ago.
Well, you can tell from the background, you've clearly relocated yourself away from London. So if we start with, I guess, highlighting some of the key things that have happened over the past handful of months, you've now relocated directly into the heart of it. But listeners that aren't familiar with Kavango, what is Kavango Resources?
So we're a metals exploration project with precious metal exploration projects in Zimbabwe and base metal exploration projects in Botswana. The company's about 10 years old. We listed in 2018 on the London Stock Exchange. Our main area of focus had previously been in Botswana, but at the start of last year, we started making the transition into Zimbabwe, which is where I'm now located, and we're pursuing gold opportunities here now as well. We're a company that is extremely well backed financially, so we've very much bucked the trend in terms of what's happening globally in the international space for financing junior small cap companies. We've managed to recruit a family of ultra high net worths, the Consagras, onto our books. They now own 52% of our company, having invested nearly £7.5 million. And moving forward, they're going to be our cornerstone investor, really helping support our efforts as we look to build a very big business in this part of the world.
Yeah, I was saying predominantly me being based in Australia and knowing all the ins and outs of the Australian billionaires, we were saying that's a big name to have on the register, and taking up 52% clearly means that there's a bit of interest from their behalf. So that's helped capitalize and get a bit of money into the company. And you touched on there the refocus, but we'll start with the gold side of the company. As you alluded to, I've seen a few announcements that you guys have occupied and got a bit more activity within the gold scene. So can you talk us through some of the projects and tenements that you've got that are focused on gold?
So I first came out to Zimbabwe in August 2022. I'd been aware of the country sort of from a professional perspective for about the last 5 years. So I did a due diligence for another firm in London back in 2019, which was looking to enter into Zimbabwe at that point. They decided not to pursue that project at the time. One of the main reasons being that the perception of the jurisdictional risk here is that Zimbabwe, if you look at any of the league rating systems for mining jurisdictions, Zim is pretty much at the bottom of most of the league tables. However, what I saw on the ground here completely flies in the face of that. I spent 5 days in August 2022, and it just blew my mind, the potential that I saw. This is a country whose economy is far surpassing what is really understood about it in the wider world. And while there are definitely challenges here, we recognise that the mining that is happening is very undercapitalised and is using very old technology, but is powering forward this country's economy. And if you look at the vehicles on the streets, the shops that are full of products, the houses that people live in, you can see that things are actually generally going much better than the statistics would have us believe. So with that as our backdrop, we decided to start looking much more seriously at Zimbabwe as a potential opportunity, not least because also with the reputation that it has, there aren't many companies like ours that are active in this space, and there's been little to no modern exploration. So there are 22 Archean greenstone belts in Zimbabwe, which, as a lot of your listeners will be aware of, this is almost the same geological setting as you have in Western Australia. Now, if you look at the history of gold production in Zim and in Australia, they pretty much followed the same trajectory from the 19th century up until around about the 1970s. So there was a lot of historic high-grade production that then declined quite sharply. But where the two countries diverged was in the mid-1980s. Post-independence and post-majority rule, Zimbabwe went through a lot of internal troubles in this country. So, there were problems here. But of course, Australia then underwent the gold mining boom, the open pit boom that has meant your country has not had a recession now, I think, in 38 years. I mean, it's been an economic miracle that's happened. And we've got the view that this is basically what's waiting to happen here in Zimbabwe. As an interesting aside, one of the statistics we like to promote on our presentation is that in 1982, Zimbabwe actually produced more gold than Australia did. Not many people are aware of that. Now, if you look at what's actually happened in Australia since, and you look at the untapped potential that there is here in Zim, it's just enormous. So the projects that we were looking for potential deposits which could host or could be open to bulk mineable potential, could have bulk mineable potential. So the two main projects that we've taken are in one of the Archean greenstone belts. We've focused our energies in one area to the southeast of Bulawayo in the south of the country. Within 6 months of signing our first option, we'd already imported a diamond drill rig, and by the end of last year, so by the start of this year, we'd actually completed 1,400 meters of diamond drilling. So we've really hit the ground running here, and we're very, very excited to get our assay results in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, the points that you talked about, the changes in Zimbabwe, I think many people have their biases about how that country is, and not necessarily understanding it, being actually living there. And that's a point you just mentioned there, being actually there and seeing it sort of contrasts a lot to what perceptions might be. And you say someone living in Zimbabwe is going to know Zimbabwe better than someone that's looking at it from Australia, for example. You alluded to there that this has got quite a rich history and quite a lot of gold potential. I mean, we're talking about it. You can see the map behind you. I mean, you talk about it being a bit underdeveloped or even, I guess, neglected potentially. Are you seeing more activity coming in as well from a business? I mean, you guys might be the first mover potentially going in there, but what is the, I guess, acceptance of international businesses coming back into Zimbabwe?
I would say at the moment, not much, but this is where we're looking to create this first mover advantage that we believe we have. So one thing about the production in Zimbabwe, which really has been powering this country's economy, is that they, up until fairly recently, had been using what really amounts to 19th century technology to process the gold. They're called stamp mills, and the way that they work is that ore is passed through. You have 3 hydraulic pistons that essentially crush up the rocks to enable the free gold to be extracted. This is technology that's about 130, 140 years old. I touched on the open pit mining boom that happened in Australia 50 years ago. That still hasn't happened in Zimbabwe. So what we see is the really exciting opportunity here for companies like ours, when people actually wake up to this, is that we're not talking about having to adopt, ultra modern methods and experiment with new ways of extracting gold. We're talking about introducing 50-year-old technology into this country to start to develop these really large-scale open pit mines. The edge that we have as a company is that what we can do is bring modern exploration methods to the party. So where 50 years ago exploration wasn't anywhere near as advanced as it is today, and the deposits that were discovered in Australia, there was a lot of trial and error. It took quite a long time to build momentum until the open pit mining boom really took off. We recognize the opportunity in Zimbabwe is to bring new methods for exploration here, apply those to discover the deposits, and then we can be using technology that's decades old then to bring these mines into production. For an exploration company like ours, it really is a dream situation, so long as you can navigate the challenges of actually working here in the country and understand the culture, understand the people and the system and how it works. And that's why you need to be strong on the ground.
And I think that alludes to the point that you have uprooted and moved over within country to be a lot closer to the projects and understand the culture, the community. And I think that's a valid step that you look at those successful companies, typically the management team, at least some of them need to be there to oversee it, really uproot their lives to be at the front and center. You just talked about then having a lot of drill campaigns and the assay results. I mean, going forward with that, I mean, what are the next steps that are rolling through your mind as what to happen, what unfolds after you get these results back, or what are the next wheels in motion potentially?
So we're following a two-pronged approach with this. So on the one hand, we want to discover these much larger open pittable deposits. Those will take time to drill out, to demonstrate the ore body, to bring into mining, to raise the capital that's required for that. Even though we think by international standards, we're talking relatively small amounts, that's still going to take, a period of time for us to be able to fulfill that vision. However, in Zimbabwe, what we've also recognized is that by applying some modern mining methods on a smaller scale, there is a lot of potential for near-term revenue generation as well. So what we're looking to build over the course of 2024 is a business that becomes operationally profitable in its own right through some of the near-term revenue opportunities that we see here, while going for the big sort of blue sky exploration play, looking to unlock some of these deposits that have yet to be discovered in Zimbabwe and bringing those through to production.
So we're just talking about there, relocating and putting management closer to base is clearly a fundamental and something important, but not many do. So I want to pick your brain about, why you've taken this pretty drastic step to move from London all the way down to Zimbabwe. I mean, what's going through your mind and why was that made?
So I've been a director of Kavango now for just over 3 years, and what I've come to learn about this industry, or one thing I've recognized about it, is I think one of the biggest mistakes that nearly all the companies make, that's in London, in Australia, in Toronto, is that a lot of the senior management, the directors, the vast majority, in fact, they try to run their businesses remotely from, the comfort of, major cities, major urban environments, which are thousands of miles away from their projects and their people on the ground. I've got to put my hand up here. I've also made that mistake, and I think it has held the company back. So I'd already been sort of thinking along these lines that actually we need to have senior management presence on the ground to run the business. I think that's an integral part of our plan moving forward. And I think that's also been what made us quite so attractive to the investment that we've managed to attract. What we've also recognized about Zimbabwe is while we're huge fans of this country, we've been made to feel very welcome here. There's a really great pool of people to work with. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of desire, a lot of entrepreneurialism. The system itself here is in need of a bit of development. So problems do come up on a day-to-day basis. Nothing that's too insurmountable by any means, but by being here on the ground, I recognize that sort of when issues do come up, I need to be here to provide leadership just to help us overcome whatever challenges we might face. But also by actually showing presence on the ground, it underlines our commitment as well. A big part of our pitch that we're making in Zimbabwe is just how keen and eager we are to become an active contributor to the development of what is really a fledgling industry in its infancy, which is the exploration space, because there aren't many exploration companies here. We want to become an active participant in that. So by relocating here, that's really underlined our company's commitment to becoming, I hope, a major player. And I think that message has been well received. I think people have recognized, so this has been a big leap for me. My family is still back in Europe. My daughters are back in Sweden. So yeah, it has been a tough move for my family, but we recognize the opportunity, the respect that this opportunity also requires, and that to do it properly, you really do need to do this on the ground.
I think that's a big commitment to know that your family is scattered elsewhere around the world, and you've sort of decided that to show full respect and to get this to where you want it to go for yourself and for shareholders, that you've got to be on boots on the ground. And I saw a draft release that you guys are looking to publish, which talks about all the packages and more so, Zimbabwe really looking to elevate themselves into 2030 and beyond. And this is sort of within those synergies. And this is really a testament to you. And if we look at a little bit more side, the copper is a big focus of the company, almost really one of the priorities. If you can rank them, we'll do that later. But can you talk to us a little bit about the copper belt focus? I mean, where it is and really some of the expectations that are unfolding over the handful of coming months? What can we look forward to?
So our copper assets are in the northwest of Botswana in the Kalahari Copper Belt, which is one of the world's sort of most prospective regions for copper exploration. There have been a number of quite large discoveries and some major transactions. We just saw 3 or 4 months ago a Chinese company, MMG, bought the Zone 5 discovery from Khoemacau Mining in Botswana for $1.8 billion. You've got Sandfire, which of course a lot of your listeners will be familiar with in Australia, who have developed the Matheo mine, which was from the original T3 deposit. So the belt itself is highly prospective. We've been working very closely with Dave Catterall, who's one of the leading experts in copper exploration in Botswana. Dave was directly behind the Zone 5 discovery, and he's also been involved in a lot of the other major projects that have been happening in the region. So his knowledge, based on 20 years of practical experience on the ground of exploring for copper in Botswana, really is second to none. So Dave has really helped transform our understanding of the copper belt and also transform our exploration programs as well. Now, to that end, we got a bit fortunate last year when a Australian company called ENRG Elements, they had some ground in the copper belt, which we'd always been very interested in. When I first joined Kavango, I approached ENRG. They used to be called Kapore Mining or Kapore Exploration, and they didn't actually look to sell us the ground. They then had a bit of an unfortunate turn of events with another project of theirs in another jurisdiction, which meant that they had to look at selling out from their project in Botswana. But what that's now meant is that we've secured that deal and secured that ground. It's tied together our two main projects, which are on maps on our websites. And what we now have is a contiguous land package of 7,800 square kilometers that we believe covers two potential copper mineralizing systems. We've done a lot of work on the ground since we took over the ENRG to level up, as Dave described it, so to bring our entire data set up to the same level across the entire project area. And we've recently flown airborne surveys that completed at the start of the year, and we've just received the data for. So the next steps for us there are to process the data, come up with drilled targets, and then move into what will prove to be an extensive exploration drill campaign, looking both to prove up that these copper mineralizing systems are what we believe they are, and hopefully to hit some commercial intersections indicating potential deposits for the future.
I mean, that's a big discussion there that you just said. It can, pretty much aligning two decent-sized copper belts together with the potential for mineralization. Was there much historical data? I mean, what's the sort of background to this area? As that you said, some of the mines that are up and about, but particularly the areas that you've got, is there much you're scanning through, old school mining results or mapping and all that? Or what's the sort of history of this area as well?
So this is a pure greenfields project. The exploration that's been done on our area has either been done by us directly or by ENRG. Before that, there was nothing. Now, if you look to the east of our ground and the northeast of our ground, that's where you have Sandfire and now MMG with their major projects that are coming into mines. If you go over to the west, into the border, over the border into Namibia, we've got Rio Tinto immediately to our west. You've got 10,000 square kilometers, and to our north in Namibia, Sandfire have extensions on their ground, which extends in from Botswana. There are further discoveries that have been made in Namibia as well, and further copper mining activity. But the area that we're in sits in the middle, and we believe the reason that this area wasn't so explored historically is that some of the original geological survey maps that were created quite a long time ago actually mistakenly identified or mislabeled some of the rock types that were available, or so not available, that were present, and also misunderstood just quite how much sand cover there was. There was a perception that the sand cover in our area was actually very deep. Well, what we found is evidence of outcropping at surface where the sand cover is zero, and it goes down to about 15 meters in most of the areas that we're looking at. So the sand cover is by no means that much of a challenge in this particular area, where historically people thought it had been. So we think this has just been an area that's been overlooked. We think there was also some misinterpretation as well. The shape of the primary mineralization was thought to shape like a straight arc. Well, we're now working on the theory that there's actually a dogleg that occurs into Namibia, and that dogleg occurs exactly where our ground begins. So it's a working theory at this stage. We think it's further supported by the fact that if we look to our north and east, where Sandfire have spent an enormous amount of money on exploration, but haven't actually had any major new discoveries in recent years. But the belt itself, statistically, should host more discoveries. So it's possible that maybe Sandfire have missed discoveries or missed deposits on their ground. Or if our idea that this dogleg that occurs and heads south before the belt continues to the west, if that proves to be accurate, then we really could be sitting on some very, very exciting ground.
Yeah, and already from the sounds of it, they're not small names that are on either sides of you, given the kilometers. But we know that with the increasing demand for both copper and some of the other minerals around the world, that once you do start making discoveries, there's of course going to be people knocking on the door wondering how much or how to strategically get involved in it, which is always an interesting phenomenon, and more so happening now. So you've got these two, I guess, areas, that two different focuses, and yourself have now moved over. I mean, when you're looking at this, the 12 months ahead of you and what you're really looking to prioritize and optimize, I mean, what are you looking at really sort of executing in the near term, and what really can investors expect?
So, from an exploration perspective in Zimbabwe, it's to drill our projects. The actual surface area of the projects is quite small, so we're able to get quite deep into the exploration programs there really quite quickly. So, we're looking to discover bulk mineable potential deposits. So, that's very straightforward in Zimbabwe. For exploration in Botswana, we're dealing with a much larger area of ground, so a much larger system. We're looking to prove, first of all, that we have these copper mineralizing systems that we believe exist. And second, we're looking for commercial intersections of copper. That's our primary exploration goal. In parallel to this, our third objective is to build up the revenue side of our business in Zimbabwe. So now that I'm here on the ground, we're looking at pursuing a number of commercial initiatives, both in terms of near-term production, but we're looking at some other initiatives as well in helping to develop the supply chain for exploration in Zimbabwe as well. As a well-financed first mover down here with a lot of commercial experience, we see a lot of opportunity. So by the end of this year, I would like us to have made a discovery. And by the end of this year, I would like to see us into pretty decent revenue as well.
That near-term revenue generation, there's a curious one. If I can pull on that thread, you're talking about bringing in ways to benefit Zimbabwe. And previously when we spoke, you said that community was a big foundation of what you wanted to look at and give back to the community. So if I'm pulling on both of those threads, if you can divulge a little bit about what potentially some of those activities might be, as the first bit, and then I'll go furthermore into, I guess, the approach of the community. But we'll start there.
So at the moment, in terms of specifics, I'm subject to confidentiality, but we will be making announcements in the near future. We had a very successful Indaba down in Cape Town, where we've pretty much secured our first deals. We're finalising terms on those and figuring out the finance for them at the moment. But what I can talk about, Ben, is our plans for near-term gold production and near-term revenue there, because we're on record. It's in our RNSs. Last year, we drill tested the dump at our Nara project. So that's from it's the legacy from the stamp mill operation that's been there for 30 years. It's a reasonable sized dump, we hope, with a reasonable grade in there. What that would offer us is it would require a particular type of processing plant to process the sands in that dump. But we're now just waiting on the resource geologist to get back with us to confirm the internal results that we've had. Now, assuming that those results do live up to our expectations, we obviously need to exercise the option at Nara, and then we need to install the plant. But if we can start processing those sands, that will be really quite a substantial opportunity for very decent cash flow generation for Kavango in the near term, and can demonstrate that we as a company can make the transition from being an exploration business to a mining business. That's one of the highest risk changes that a company like ours can make once they've made a discovery. And it's normally where a lot of these companies actually fail that do make discoveries. So we're looking to take a staged approach with this that's quite measured. We're not going to sort of rush in and need 20 or 30 million dollars to put up, sort of quite a sophisticated processing plant. We're looking to take a smaller approach to begin with and develop our skill base in-house and build up, and at the same time start to generate revenue.
I like that at the beginning. Confidentiality is key, and that's almost a hook for people to put it in their watch list potentially to keep an eye on everything as it unfolds. But upskilling the community, if we pull on that thread there, I know that's one of the pillars, arguably, of Kavango Resources. I've seen it on the website and more so in conversations you've had. I mean, what does that really mean for you, and more so the people and even the government there, that you guys are going in with such an intention to, bring skills and educate and really bring this community out of, potentially some tough times that they have been going through?
So a lot of companies pay lip service to this type of thing, but it's something we as a business have always pursued. And if you look at our track record in Botswana, during COVID, because the overwhelming majority of our staff were Botswana nationals, we were able to continue our exploration programs, albeit with some restrictions on movement when the COVID restrictions were in place. But we weren't reliant on flying in external consultants and external staff because, of course, people couldn't fly at that stage. So we were one of the few companies that were able to keep up very good momentum with our exploration in Botswana, because this has always been a key part of our strategy. Well, we're taking that exact same ethos and we're bringing it into Zimbabwe. Wherever possible, we're looking to recruit Zimbabwean nationals into positions within our team. We've got a number of hires from senior commercial down to field geotechs, all from Zimbabwe. We're very committed to training and professional development, so we fund a master's program for one of our staff at the moment. A second one is about to start a master's program too. We really do take our role very seriously in terms of upskilling and hopefully leaving behind a positive footprint when some of our time will be up within the communities we're working in. We also look to engage the local communities as well. So a lot of exploration requires casual labor, for example. So we always make sure that we will recruit from the local communities when we need the casual labor. That helps introduce just not huge, but at least a little bit of income into these communities. And also it provides them with, I think, a degree of confidence that, in the event that we do discover a mine, this is a mine that will become a local employer and develop sort of local supply chain. So I think it's a very sort of mutually beneficial approach. It benefits us as a company. It helps us meet our corporate objectives, but it also helps benefit the communities as well. And those members of our team who, want to get on, who want to develop themselves professionally, who want to be promoted, so for example, a field geotech might want to get a geology degree and graduate to becoming a geologist. Well, we'll be fully supportive of that. And that's exactly the kind of initiative I'm very keen that we as a business pursue.
Oh, I appreciate it. And again, it all floods back to me knowing that you've, uprooted your life and moved over as a key leader of Kavango. And I want to touch more maybe on a bit of the team surrounding you. You've got quite a lot of experience on hand, and you talk about upskilling locals, both in Botswana and Zimbabwe. But have other board members moved with you, and also just the structure, mate? Who else is in the leadership squadron for Kavango Resources?
So Hilary Gumbo is one of our co-founders, one of our PLC directors. Hilary is actually a Zimbabwean national. He lives up in Harare. So that's at the other end of the country. But Hilary comes down now regularly down to Bulawayo. Hilary has been fantastic to help us establish our operations and establish our foundation here. He's very well known. He's very talented. He's been heavily involved in this industry for 30 odd years now. So he's 35 years actually. So he's very, very experienced hand to have on deck. He's very technical. And yeah, he's helped open up a lot of doors and has also helped guide our programs. In terms of our leadership on the ground down here in Bulawayo, our main guy that we're working with is a guy called Steve Smith. So Steve was the former business development manager for Anglo American in Tanzania. He's an extremely experienced field geologist. He spent his whole career in all sorts of places working on major deposits and discoveries. He's actually got 6 million ounces of gold discoveries under his belt. So his pedigree and his talent and track record really is first rate. Now, Steve's actually been in Zimbabwe for about 15 years. When he first came out here in 2008, he really fell in love with the geology. I mean, the rocks that you see here and the amount of gold that you see everywhere, he saw the potential from a geological perspective. Now, obviously, from a commercial perspective, Zimbabwe hasn't been a sort of destination of choice for international money yet, but Steve really has developed an encyclopedic knowledge of the greenstone belts, not only within Matabeleland, where we're focused in the south of the country, but throughout Zimbabwe. We now have also a very experienced exploration manager, a guy called Leon Duval. So Leon is now running our team on the ground. But we've also recruited in Harare some local Zimbabweans. One who's going to be becoming our chairman. I can't reveal his name just yet, but he's going to become our local chairman for Kavango Zimbabwe. And we have another guy who's going to be taking on a senior executive role with us, who's again proven to be extremely useful on the ground. Again, I need to keep his details to myself at the moment, but we really are building up an extremely strong team here, not only from the technical exploration perspective, but also from the commercial perspective as well. We're going to build a business here, Ben, and we're going to build a very, very serious one.
No, you can tell from the way that you're speaking from the outset of today that there really is this alignment and serious compassion and even direction towards, compassion is the right word, but I was going to say focus is probably a more accurate description of yourself and the team there and what you're trying to achieve. And we've talked about quite a lot. And as you said, there's a few things that are going to come to market, which means people need to be aware of the stock and the company and where to follow it. So for listeners that are looking to engage more with the company and stay on top of it all, I mean, where can they go to keep an eye on Kavango Resources?
So our website is www.kavango, Kavango resources.com. We're also very active on Twitter. So if you type Kavango Resources Twitter into Google, you'll find us very easily. I'm also quite heavily involved. There's a Kavango Resources Telegram group. We occasionally will promote the link to that on our Twitter feed, and we'll start to put that on our announcements as well. That gives investors the opportunity to engage with me directly. Alternatively, my details are published at the bottom of RNSs, and I'm always very happy to engage with any investors who have any questions about the company.
That's interesting. Telegram. I like that. We can definitely see that there's a trend to get investors more engaged directly with management, sort of transitioning away from how things have been. And if that's a way to describe this whole conversation, it's pretty much, verging away from what has been and hopefully bring something new to Zimbabwe, Botswana, and really the resources game. But we talked about a lot, and I'll probably get you to repeat it again, but if there's three key takeaways that investors should be aware of or almost expect out of Kavango over the next 12 months, what would those three things be?
So first of all, gold exploration in Zimbabwe, looking to identify bulk mineable near surface gold deposits. That's our primary objective. In Botswana, we're focusing on, so the second area is in Botswana, where we're looking to make a major copper discovery in our Kalahari copper belt projects. Both of these, we are funded for our drilling programs, and we have access to a lot more money for much further extensive drilling if we need it. And then third and not least is our focus on generating revenue in Zimbabwe. We're looking at a number of near-term revenue generating activities to get our business up to a point where in Zim, our objective is to become operationally profitable in this country.
Well, there's plenty of breadcrumbs there for investors and listeners alike to keep an eye on it. It's going to be an exciting year from the sounds of it, and it's going to be a bit easier to stay in contact with you in Zimbabwe, and I'm sure there's going to be some fascinating updates over the course of the year. But yeah, thank you so much, Ben, for taking the time to speak with me on the show today.
Thanks very much for having me, Ben.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. Please remember that the topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial advice. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and follow. You can follow the Market Bull on all our socials and keep up to date with global market insights.